in this special show of Newsclick and Communalism Combat, we have with us senior advocate from the Supreme Court, Mr. Colin Gonsalves, who, apart from being a renowned human rights advocate, has specifically appeared in the case of the human rights violation in the state of Manipur. On July 8th, 2016, we had a historic verdict from the Supreme Court, an 80-odd page judgment related to special powers of the armed forces in the state of Manipur under the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Hello, Mr. Gonsalves. We'll talk specifically about this verdict and other issues. Mr. Gonsalves, the significance of this verdict for the families of the survivors, the victims that you represented, the association that you represented, and then the wider implications of the law.
Well, it's just the first part of the verdict. The second part is to come. And the second part is, in a sense, even more important, because that will say whether investigations are to be done by a special investigation team or the CBI or whatever. But notwithstanding that, just the first part, which is a part on principles, it's a huge step forward for the people of Manipur. We've been doing these cases for now roughly 15 years, individual cases, fact findings and so on. And we went for the first fact finding where Irom Sharmila came with us and Justice Suresh was there. Can you imagine? We just went there and she followed us on her cycle, and she was quite taken aback by the things that she saw and the things that were being spoken of and so on. And 2 weeks later, a police person was shot in the urinal, where the toilet, and his whole platoon came out and sprayed bullets in the marketplace, and some 10-12 people were killed. Yeah, and that's when the fast started. So it's been a very long journey. We've been doing cases even prior to that fact finding, and it's amazing that people have stood resilient for so long, hope for so long. They've got their papers even till today of the complaints that they made some 10, 12, 15 years ago. So for the people of Manipur, this is a huge statement by the Supreme Court that persons who do it, even if they are army personnel or commandos, they should be punished. There's no absolute immunity from prosecution. And most important, the truth must be found out. That's what they ask for. We just want to know the truth. And we want people punished. That's it.
It's 58 years since the Armed Forces Special Powers Act has been in force in Manipur and in the other states of the northeastern region. When it was brought into Parliament in 1958, then Home Minister Govind Ballabh Pant, Minister of State, said that it was a necessary law. And at that time, parliamentarian Long Shwa, he said in the Parliament that it's anti-democratic, it's inhuman. What is it in the law that is problematic, per se, for the normal viewer? What sort of immunity does it grant? And why the resistance in the armed forces and security apparatus for its repealment?
See, we've had a number of meetings with very high-level government officials from time to time, both in Manipur and Delhi, where we've had meetings and fact findings and things like that. And we've had connections with certain generals from the army and military advisors to the government whom we've spoken to from time to time. And it's amazing that most of them in private, except for a few hardliners really, most of them in private say, this is not the way to go. And I remember them saying it 10 years ago. I remember them saying it now, just a couple of years ago. So there are very sane people within the armed forces and within government military advisory sections, who say that this is not the way to go at all. And we have misused the powers given to us, and there's no end to the conflict if we go this route. And yet, year after year after year, the killings happen. The army condones the killings. The army comes up with these totally fictitious stories. And so it seems to me almost as if politicians control what the army does, maybe in a way. And the politicians want an area of perpetual strife to continue and continue and continue. There's no logic. There's no reason. And in fact, we asked Justice Hegde to recommend the setting up of another commission to look into how peace can be restored. Nobody wants to listen to that side of it at all.
That didn't happen.
He didn't recommend it, but we can ask this court as well to recommend that, but it didn't happen at all. Why shouldn't civil society and concerned people from across India actually get involved in finding a roadmap to peace. Why should we leave it to the army? Why should we leave it to all these nonsensical and corrupt politicians? Why can't the people of India actually interact with the people of Manipur and say we don't need AFSPA at all, and find a roadmap to peace?
In fact, that's interesting that you say that, because one state of the northeast, one of the 7 states, Tripura,
Yes,
which has had a CPM government for many years, February or March 2015, they have repealed AFSPA as far as Tripura is concerned. And when we did this interview with the Chief Minister, he said in fact he has faith that the fact that his police can handle the people, because there's a sense of trust and community between the two. So if one state can do it, I don't see why the others cannot.
Yeah, it just needs you to modernize your police force. It just needs you to train them properly. And it needs you to deal with people whom you are suspicious of, let's say, with dignity. You've got to get rid of this dadagiri mentality, that a person is not allowed to speak back to you, that a person is not allowed to criticize you, that a citizen of India can't stand with dignity and answer a question of an army officer or a police commander without getting a slap on his face. You've got to get out of this dadagiri mentality and treat citizens of India with respect. That's all.
It's interesting that you say that, because one of the allegations against human rights activists and human rights thing by the security apparatus, even by policemen, is that we don't care, or the human rights community doesn't care about the genuine quote-unquote killings that army personnel or Assam, whoever it is, paramilitary personnel, face by those who are armed insurgents. How did you put forward your response to that argument before the court, and how would you answer that in public?
Well, it was a serious issue, because in response to our petition, which dealt only with fake encounters, it didn't deal with the second aspect of Manipur life, which is inescapable to recognize, is that on the one hand you have fake encounters, persons picked up, tortured, interrogated, killed, and then a pretense is made that it was an encounter. That's one aspect, but there's an equally important second aspect, which is that there are armed insurgents. They attack the army and the police from time to time, and they inflict maybe quite a considerable amount of fatalities and injuries on the armed forces. Are human rights activists not aware of this? We are. Are human rights activists not concerned by the fact that lives are lost stupidly when our armed forces and so on are attacked by insurgents and militants and killed? Are we not concerned? Do we not care? We care equally for a member of the armed forces being killed in a genuine encounter. We grieve as much for a person of the armed forces who's killed like that. So when the army generals confront us in the television program, my answer is always to say, General Saab, you're not wrong. When you say that your officers, your boys are being killed, you're not wrong, you're absolutely right. Only thing is, you presume that we don't grieve for your boys. We grieve for your boys as much as anybody else. It's a senseless loss of life. But we're only saying, General Saab, you must recognize, and you surely know, that there's another very dark side of Manipur, activities, which is your people are taking people to the army barracks and killing them in cold blood and torturing them. Shouldn't that stop at some stage? That's all that we are saying. So we're not necessarily opposed to the armed forces and so on. In fact, in the court case, it became very important for us to do this, because the Attorney General said, we are at war. If you are in a genuine war, please conduct the war according to your army. We, human rights activists or anybody else, we can't dare come anywhere near the conduct of war. But this is not war, sir. Taking a person into your barracks and killing him is not war. That is cowardice at best, and torture and criminality. So that is how we distinguished it. And the army must know that human rights activists are not against them per se. We are against them only when the rogue elements, or whatever you might say, within the forces commit criminality of this.
And a sense of immunity, that you will not be prosecuted, just gives more courage to the rogue elements, because there is no accountability.
Yeah. In fact, I asked in the same program just a couple of days ago, I said, I can't understand why the Chief of Army Staff hasn't corrected this for 50 years. You know it's happening. And because the Chief of Army Staff, and maybe above him are politicians and ministers, God knows who tell him to allow this thing to continue. So once the message comes from the top that you can pick up anybody on the excuse that he's a terrorist, pick him up and then just, do whatever you want, extort money perhaps also, I don't know. That immunity now is solid in Manipur. It's absolutely solidified. Immunity is as powerful as the Constitution, perhaps even more powerful than the Constitution. The law of immunity, that I can do whatever I want, everybody becomes a James Bond with a license to kill, is as powerful as the Constitution itself. Who cares for the Constitution?
One of the aspects that came out through the documentation and the arguments during this legal action and also the other fact findings has been the fact that many of the police officers and the paramilitary and army personnel who are in fact involved in fake encounters are often also rewarded with gallantry medals.
We saw that, and this is a situation I think in other parts of the country as well, like Chhattisgarh, where it is alleged the person who sexually violated Soni Sori was a person who was given a presidential gold medal.
That is certainly recommended by the political class, and I think recommended by senior officers as well. And we find it in Manipur as well. In fact, the Justice Hegde Commission was quite taken aback to see, the award of medals and so on for killing people in cold blood. I think there's a comment in the Hegde report on this as well. That is something which is really deplorable, that you don't bother to check who it is you're giving medals to, and these are one of the highest medals given to police officers. Coming back to the specifics of the case that was before the Supreme Court, I think could you just distinguish for the viewers as to the total of about maybe 1,500 such fake encounters for the last 58 years, if I'm not mistaken,
That's right.
And 66 in the last 10 years?
Well, it's like this. There were 1,500 cases altogether covering a longish period of time. But the court, it's just that we had data in respect of 62, more specific data, eyewitness accounts and so on. So those 62 were segregated and pleaded separately. So the court took up 62 because that was easy for the court to do. 1,500 was a bit unmanageable in that sense. And out of 62, the Justice Hegde Commission looked at 6. Randomly, they looked at 6. And the Hegde Commission proceedings were extraordinary, really, because for the first time, army officers and police officers were put into the witness box and cross-examined by our dear friend Mukul Sinha. And it was so pathetic to see the army and security forces, police, not able to make the point that a single one of them had a criminal record. And in all cases, mechanically say, they ran towards us, we opened fire, one died, one escaped, 9mm pistol. And there were eyewitnesses in the boy Javed's case, the young boy, 9 years old, 11 years old. There were eyewitnesses, his grandfather, father. He was reading the newspaper to his mother, whose eyes were weak. And they came to his house, grabbed him by the collar, took him to the garden, shot him dead in front of everybody. And yet you say he's a dreaded terrorist. And it was incredible because we cross-examined these people and they said, yes, he's a dreaded terrorist. So we said, Mukul said, so how do you know? We have a list. I see. His name is on that list? Yes. You've seen the list? No. Has anyone seen the list? I don't know, sir. Did you ask for the list? No, sir. Then how do you know it's in the list? Even if it is not in the list, I know that he is a terrorist. Meaning? Sir, they came from that village. Meaning? मतलब ये है साहब कि उस गाँव के लोग कहते हैं कि सारे terrorist लोग उसमें हैं. So that means if any more people come from that village, you'll shoot them dead? Yes, sir.
Like General Dyer.
Yeah. So he concluded that not a single one of them was a terrorist, not a single one of them had a criminal record, and all these cases are fake encounter cases. So it's the Justice Hegde Commission that really made the breakthrough in terms of persuading the Supreme Court, which is generally very reluctant to get into these very troublesome areas. I think Justice Hegde's commission took the first decisive step. A report without ambiguity, a report without doubt, a report based on certainty that these are all fake encounters.
And this was in 2013.
2013.
And what made the Justice Hegde Commission happen? Your previous litigation?
The previous litigation, we had quite emotional exchanges with the court on the need for an SIT, a special investigation team, and CBI, and so on. And Justice Aftab Alam, who was heading the bench, said, before I order an investigation, I need to be convinced that your material is somewhat genuine. That was the lurking doubt at the back of his mind, that maybe Mr. Gonsalves is giving something that is, make-believe and all that. He had a slight lurk. I think he had, 90% conviction that this sounds genuine. And particularly, he had to be sure. And that's when he appointed the commission to lend assurance to any future orders that the court may pass. And that's why he ordered the Justice Hegde.
Going back a bit to 2004, when we had the 7th July, that terrible case of Manorama Devi. Yeah. And it was a freshly elected UPA-1 government, and the whole Manipur sort of was outraged and on fire. Yeah. with that, torture and custodial death, and women came out on the street in protest. Yeah. And then followed on the heels with the Jeevan Reddy Commission. Yeah. And its recommendations. Yeah. What would you have to say about that development?
See, Manorama's case I followed closely because I was involved in some way with that commission of inquiry and the evidence led in the commission of inquiry. And I did 2 cases in the Guwahati High Court, and now it's pending in the Supreme Court on the commission of inquiry and the implementation of that. You should just look at the commission of inquiry documentation of evidence. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And the conclusion is very simple, that she was picked up from her house. She had no previous criminal record again. She was taken in a long kind of a journey around Manipur. They passed police station after police station. And you know that the Naga people's case says that you must drop her at the first police station. They didn't do that. They kept her till 4 o'clock in the morning. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, they say she made an excuse that she wanted to urinate, made a pretense of squatting, and then took off in an open field. And then they asked her, 17 Hatta Katta Jawans of the Assam Rifles said, Ruko, Ruko, she didn't stop, and they shot her dead. Did you try and pursue her? No. Did you try and chase her, etc.? No. Was it an open field, or were there obstacles? No obstacles, so open field. So you just run. You just run and catch her. They didn't do that. And most important, there was a witness. There was a woman who had come out at night to relieve herself, and she noticed, she saw the incident. She saw them come and then take her body like that and dump her, and then she heard shots, etc. So, and then the conclusion is that she was shot in her groin to hide the rape and so on, and she was shot in many places. And the conclusion of the commission of inquiry was that it was a fake encounter. To get that commission of inquiry out took us 8 years, 7-8 years. And then they came to the Supreme Court, said that the state doesn't have the power to appoint a commission of inquiry. So that is now in the Supreme Court. Interim relief, 10 lakhs to Manorama's family for that incident was given just now, very reluctantly.
What about the
Jeevan Reddy? See, Jeevan Reddy, according to us, was a great fake. Manmohan Singh went to the Northeast and said, I feel your pain. The great, I feel your pain. We'll do something, we'll do something, we'll do something. He went there and he tricked them. Basically, he tricked the people of Manipur that he's appointing the Jeevan Reddy committee and so on. Jeevan Reddy is an extraordinarily good judge who made an extraordinarily bad report. And the reasoning in the report is so terrible. Two paragraphs stand out really for Jeevan Reddy. The first is the paragraph which says that the people of Manipur feel that they are discriminated against, that there's a law like AFSPA only against Manipur, why not against the country? So he took that argument to its logical conclusion, namely that if it's there only for Manipur, let's meet the demand of the people of Manipur and make it for the whole country. So in the first paragraph he says repeal it, the provisions are draconian. And in the second paragraph he says put it in the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act and so on, so make it applicable for the whole country. And then that was used to mislead a lot of human rights activists who saw the first paragraph, that it should be repealed, who didn't see the second paragraph which said put it in the new act. So we did a long campaign against it, but it was not easy because there were a lot of people who were supporting the report being accepted by government and so on. Ultimately, I think government has shelved the report. It's a completely useless report.
I think talking about Manipur, it's the fitness of things to end the interview with talking about Sharmila Irom and her absolutely iconic fast and human rights endeavor, and actually, which is probably unprecedented in the world. And the efforts of the state to consistently get her to break the fast, to arrest her, and is uncomfortable with this iconic symbol of Sharmila Irom.
Yeah, I want to tell you actually, it started with a visit that we did at what was called a People's Tribunal to Manipur with Justice Suresh, much younger than in those days, and we went from village to village interviewing people who had been killed by the armed forces. And then we saw this little wisp of a girl coming behind on a cycle, cycling and so on. So she would come and watch, then she would follow us again. We went in the car, but she'd follow in her cycle. And she saw us taking testimonies of people. I remember she was by my side when we took the testimony of a person who was lying down, who was holding his intestines in his hand. He had been shot and his intestines had come out, and he was holding it like that. And so we were taking photographs of his. So she was appalled by what she saw and what she heard. I remember she came also to a place where the security forces had gone into a hut and allegedly raped the girl in that hut and so on. So those were the kind of testimonies being taken.
It made a sharp imprint on her.
It made a unforgettable imprint in her mind, because we left and I remember she gave my wife a little shawl and we were very sweet, and we thought she was just like any other, young student who was very impressionable and so on. But something like 2 months later, when a police commando was in the urinal and some militant went and shot him dead, his whole platoon came out to the marketplace a couple of hours later and sprayed the vegetable vendors with gunfire. And I think a large number of them, 11 or 12 of them, were killed. That was reported in the newspaper. Sharmila, with no political understanding, political background, political gurus, anyone to turn to for advice, nothing. A simple Manipur girl. She must have been in her 20s, early 20s, or mid 20s or whatever. She declared her fast. And she remained resolute. Many people have gone to her and said, Sharmila, what are you achieving? AFSPA is still continuing. Don't you think it's better to break your fast? All kinds of people went and made all kinds of advice, unsolicited advice, really. And it was just, it's part of her, really. And she is the symbol of resistance in Manipur against AFSPA.
Thank you so much for talking to us, Colin. Thank you very much. Yeah.